is. I mean, it's a day late, but whatever. Today, as you can see on the screen, we're doing a video on the Ticci Toby. I'm going to be reading it while I have images. Now here's the story. The long road home seemed to go on and on. The road continued to outstretch in front of the vehicle endlessly. The light that shone through the branches of the tall green trees danced across the window in random patterns, every once in a while obnoxiously shining in your eyes. The surroundings was full of deep green trees forming a forest around the road. The only sound of the car's engine as it traveled down the path. It was peaceful and let off a serene feeling. Although the ride seemed like a nice one, it lacked every form of nice for both passengers. The middle-aged woman behind the steering wheel had a neat, short brown hair that fit her complexion quite well. She wore a green V-neck t-shirt and a pair of blue jeans. Diamond stud earrings decorated each of her ears with partially showed from behind her haircut. She had deep green eyes which were brought out by her shirt, and the lighting seemed to make them more noticeable. There wasn't much significance to her appearance. She just looked like any average mother that you see on TV shows and such. But one thing for sure made her different from those average mothers that was dark bags. Her facial expression was gloomy and sad, although she genuinely looked like one who smiled a lot. She would sniffle every once in a while, and occasionally glance back at her rear view mirror to look back at her son in the back seat, who was hunched over, partially his arms held tightly around his chest, and his head pressed against the cold window. The boy lacked any normal appearance. Anyone who could blandly see something that was wrong with him. His messy brown hair went in every which way, and his pale, almost gray skin brought the luminescent lighting. His eyes were dark, unlike his mother's, and he wore a white t-shirt and scrub pants that had been provided to him by the hospital. He had worn before were so shredded and blood-stained. They weren't wearable anymore. The right side of his face bared a few cuts along with his split eyebrow. His right arm was bandaged up all the way to his shoulder, which he had shredded in when his right side had hit the shattered glass. His injuries appeared to be painful, when he couldn't really feel a thing. He never could feel a thing. That was just one of the glories about being him. One of the many challenges he had to face growing up. Was growing up with a rare disease that caused him to be completely numb towards pain. Never before had he felt himself get hurt. He could have lost an arm and felt nothing. And another major disorder he had faced was one of the deemed many insulting nicknames in the short time he attended grade school. before he was moved to homeschooling was his Tourette syndrome, which caused him to tick and twitch in ways he couldn't control. He would crack his neck uncontrollably and twitch every once in a while. The kids would tease him and call him Ticci Toby and mock him with exaggerated twitching and laughing. It got so bad he turned to homeschooling. It was too hard for him to begin a common learning environment with seemingly every kid poking or stabbing fun at him. Toby stared blankly out the window. His face was empty of depicable emotion, and every few minutes his shoulder, arm, or foot would twitch. Every bump the car tire hits made his stomach turn. Toby Rogers was the boy's name. The last time Toby remembered riding in a car was when it crashed. That's all he thought about, unconsciously replaying everything he had remembered before he blacked out over and over again. Toby had been the lucky one. His sister hadn't been so lucky. When the thought of his older sister came, he couldn't help but let his eyes begin to tear up. The horrible memories were played in his mind. Screaming that had been cut off when the front of the car was smashed in. It all went blank for a moment before Toby opened his eyes to see his sister's body, her forehead pierced with glass shards. Her hips and legs were crushed under the force of the steering wheel, her torso pushed in from the late inflating bag, and this was the last thing he had seen of his dear older sister. The road home continued on for what seemed like forever. It took so long to get home due to his mother wanting to avoid passing the site of the crash. When in the surrounding gave into a familiar neighborhood, they had both been more than ready to get out of the car and step back into their own home. It was an older neighborhood with quaint little houses all next to each other. The car drove in front of a little blue house with white window panes. They both quickly noticed the old vehicle that was parked in front of the house and the familiar figure who stood out in the driveway. Toby felt automatic anger and frustration took over him at the sight of his father who wasn't there. His mother pulled the car up into the driveway beside him before turning off the engine, preparing to step out and face her husband. "Why is he here?" Toby said quietly as he looked back at his mother, who reached to open the door. "He's your father, Toby. He's here because he wants to see you," his mother responded with a monotone voice, trying to sound less shaky. Yet he couldn't have driven up to the hospital to see Lyra before she died. Toby narrowed his eyes out the window. He was drunk like that night, honey. He couldn't drive. Yeah, when is he not? Toby pushed open the door before his mother had stumbled out into the driveway before he met his father's gaze, before looking down at his feet with a stern expression. His mother stepped out behind him at her husband's eyes before walking out of the car, around the car. His father opened up his arm, expecting a hug from his wife, but she walked past him and put her arm around Toby's shoulder and influenced him to begin walking outside. "Connie," her husband began to say in a raspy voice, "Wouldn't it welcome home, huh?" She ignored her husband's obnoxious words and walked past him with her son under her arm. "Hey, he's 16. He can walk by himself." His father began to follow them in. "He's 17, Connie glared. back at him before opening the door to the house and stepping inside. Toby, why don't we get you in your room to rest, okay? I'll come in and get you when dinner is ready. No, I'm 16. I can walk by myself, Toby said sarcastically as he glared back at his father before stumbling up the small staircase and turning into his room where he slammed the door violently. The little room didn't have much in it. Just a small bed, a dresser, a window, and his walls had a few framed pictures of his family, back when they were a family, before his father became an alcoholic and acted violently towards the rest of the family. Toby remembered when he was arguing with his mother and he grabbed her by the hair and shoved her to the floor, and when Lyra had tried to break it up, he pushed her and she hit her back on the corner of the kitchen and counter. Toby could never forgive him for what he did to his mother and his sister. Never. Toby didn't care how much his father beat him down. He couldn't end up feeling any anyway. What he did care about was how he intentionally hurt the only two people he cared about. Toby stood by the window and looked out onto the street. He could have sworn he saw things out of the corner of his eye, but quickly blamed it on the medication he had been put on. When dinner time had come around and his mother called up to him, Toby came down the stairs and hesitantly sat down at the table across from his father, and between his mother and an empty chair. It was quiet as his parents picked up their food, but Toby refused to eat. Instead, he watched his dad with a blank stare. His mother caught onto his stare towards his father and elbowed him slightly. Toby looked over her slightly and looked down at his uneaten food, in which he didn't touch. Toby laid in bed. He pulled his covers over his head and stared at the window. He was tired, but there was no way he could fall asleep. He couldn't. There was too much to think. Toby laid in bed, pulled his covers over his head, and stared at the window. He was tired, but there was no way he could fall asleep. He couldn't. There was too much to think about. He had been debating on whether or not to follow his mother's directions and forgive his father. Continue holding a grudge with his boiling hatred. He heard his door creak open. His mother padded into the room and sat on the bed next to him. She reached over and rubbed his back, which had been turned to her. I know it's hard, Toby. Trust me. I understand. But I promise you'll get better, she said softly. When is he going to leave? Toby said with an innocent tone in his shaky voice. Honey let her gaze fall down to her feet. I don't know, honey. He's staying as far as I know, she replied. Toby didn't respond. He just continued to look forward at the wall, holding his damaged arm near his chest. After a few minutes of silence, his mother sighed before she leaned in to kiss his cheek and stood up to walk out the room. Good night, she said as she closed the door. The hours passed slowly, and Toby couldn't quit tossing and turning every time he let his imagination take over. He heard the screeching of tires, the screaming of his sister, and he could uncontrollably jerk in bed. He threw off his covers, lying on his back. He pulled his pillow over his face and cried into it. He couldn't feel his chest. He could feel his chest rise and fall as he let out a shaky breath as he cried. I know it's hard, Toby. Trust me. I understand. But I promise you will get it better, she said softly. When is he going to leave? Toby didn't respond. He just continued to look forward at the wall. After a few minutes of silence, his mother sighed. Before she leaned in to kiss his cheek and stood up to walk out of the room. "Good night," she said, as she closed the door. The hours passed slowly, and Toby couldn't tossing and turning. Every time his imagination took over, he heard the screeching of tigers, the screaming of his sister, and he could uncontrollably jerk in bed. He threw off his covers, laying on his back. He pulled his pillow over his face and cried into it. He could feel his chest rise and fall as he let out each shaky breath as he cried. He could hear his own pitiful weeping. He would have been screaming and crying if he didn't press his pillow over his face. For a few seconds, he threw the pillow off his face and sat up, hunching over, holding his head and breathing roughly, tears streaming down his eyes as he couldn't help but cry. He tried to keep it in, but he couldn't help whine and whimper as he sat there shaking. And he inhaled before he stood up, walked around his bed to the window and peered out, taking deep breaths, trying to calm down. He rubbed his eyes, looked out at the group of tall pine trees across the street. He stopped suddenly. His gaze slowly centered on something standing under the streetlight. He had ringing in his ears and he couldn't look away. The figure stood beside the street, about 2 feet shorter than it. His long arms draped at its side stared up at him with non-existing eyes. The figure had no features whatsoever. No eyes, no mouth, no nose, and yet it held Toby's hypnotized stare. Seemingly peering into its very being. The ringing in his ears grew louder and louder each second, and he stared before suddenly it went all blank. The next morning, Toby woke up in his bed. He felt different. He wasn't tired at all, and when he consciously woke up, it felt like he had been lying there awake for hours. No thoughts flowing through his mind, and he sat up slowly and stumbled over to the wall. But when he stood up, he automatically felt dizzy. He stumbled to the doorway and walked down the stairs. His parents were sitting at the table. His father was in tune with the small TV that sat on the countertop, and his mother reading the newspaper. She quickly looked over and she felt Toby's presence looming behind her. "Well, good morning, sleepyhead. You've been sleeping forever," she greeted him with a hesitated smile. Toby slowly looked over at the clock and noticed it was 12:30 p.m. "I made you breakfast, but it got cold. I was going to wake you up, but you needed sleep." Her expression fell from happy to worried as her son resisted in responding to her. "Are you all right?" Toby stumbled over by his father. He felt as if he was on idle. He had no control over his actions. He was seeing everything he did, but he didn't seem to register his brain properly. He reached out to his father's arm, but his hand ended up getting slapped. His father turned to him abruptly and pushed his chair over with his foot. "Don't touch me, boy," he yelled. His mother stood up. "All right, knock that off. That's the last thing we need." days went by and things continued on as they were. Connie spent most of her time cleaning up the house. Her rude husband spent most of the time ordering around. It was just what it used to be before the crash. Toby never really left his room. He would sit by his bed and tremble. His mind would wander, but his thoughts changed too fast to be remembered. He would pace around the small room like a caged animal, or stare out the window, or the unhealthy cycle continued. Connie continued to be pushed around by her husband, being way too submissive to him, and Toby remained in his room. Before he would think twice, he would begin to chew on his hand. Before he would think twice, he would begin to chew on his hands, tearing the flesh from his fingers. He would gnaw his hands until they bled. When his mother walked in on him while doing so, she reached horribly and rushed him downstairs and grabbed the first aid, which wrapped his hands in it. She demanded that he wouldn't leave her side from then. He isolated himself so much that he grew to hate being around others. His memory grew glitchy as well. He started missing memory of minutes, hours, days, and so on. He would begin talking nonsense about old things completely unrelated to conversations he would have. He'd go off about seeing things. Sharks in his sink as he washed the dishes, hearing crickets in his pillows, and seeing ghosts outside the bedroom window. All the nonsense landed on counselor's office, and his mother grew too anxious about his mental health. She decided it would be great for him to talk to a professional about what he was feeling. Connie walked Toby to the building, holding his hand and guiding him in as he walked to the front desk, as Sue sat behind it. Mr. Rogers, Mr. Rogers, the lady asked. Yes, that's me. And he said, we're here to see Dr. Oliver. I'm here with Toby Rogers. Yes, right this way. The lady stood up and led down the long hallway. Toby looked at the framed artwork down the halls and turned into the sound of the lady's high heels on the hardwood floor. She opened the door to a room with a table and 2 chairs. If we can get him to sit in here for a few minutes, I'll get the doctor. She smiled and held the door open. Toby stumbled into the room and sat down at the table. He looked over at his mother and the lady before the door slowly shut behind them. He looked around the room before he held up his tightly bandaged hands and began to bite the bandages to unwrap his hands, but was interrupted as the door swung open and the young man in a black and white spotted dress and a light blonde, and the young woman in a blonde hair stepped in, holding a clipboard and a pen. Toby, she smiled with a smile. Toby looked up at her and nodded. Nice to meet you, Toby. The name is Dr. Oliver. She put her hand out for him to shake it, but hesitantly pulled away when she noticed his bandaged hands. Oh, she smiled nervously before clearing her throat and sitting in the chair across the table from him. So I'm going to ask you a few questions. Try to answer them honestly as possible, okay? She placed her clipboard down on the table. Toby, he slowly and Table nodded slowly and his restrained hands in his lap. How old are you, Toby? 17, he responded quietly. She wrote that down on the paper and was clipped to the clipboard. What's your full name? Toby Aaron Rogers. Toby Aaron Rogers. Loopers! What is your birthday? April 28th. Who is your immediate family? Toby paused for a minute before answering her question. My mom, my dad, and my sister. I heard about your sister, dear. I'm really sorry. Expression faded into a sad, pity-filled look. Toby nodded. Do you remember anything from the crash, Toby? Toby looked away from her. His mind went blank for a moment. He looked down at his lap and the surrounding. He heard the faint ringing sound. His eyes widened and froze in his place. Toby? The counselor asked. Toby, are you listening? Toby felt a shiver go down his spine until he froze once again and slowly looked over at the little window through the door, where he saw the dark, featureless figure peering out at him. He stared, eyes wide, the ringing growing louder and louder until suddenly the loud voice of the counselor broke his trance. Toby! She yelled. Toby jumped and fell sideways out of his chair and back up into a corner. Dr. Oliver stood up, holding the clipboard to her chest, a surprised look in her eyes. Toby met her eyes again. Toby met her eyes again, his breath hitching as he twitched. But that night, Toby laid in bed, his eyes dazed as he stared straight up at his ceiling. He could feel himself begin to doze off when he heard the scattering of footsteps down his hallway. He sat up and looked towards the doorway, his door wide open. There was no light. Everything was lit by a blue glow. The moon through his window and a cold light. He stood up and slowly made his way towards the doorway. When suddenly the door was previously wide open, slammed in his face, he gasped and fell back. He was out of breath when he hit the ground, and he began breathing heavily. His eyes wide open. He waited for a few seconds before getting back up on his feet. He reached out and grabbed the cold door handle with his bandaged hand and creaked it open. He looked out of the dark hallway and tiptoed out of his room. The window at the end of the hallway lit up darkness with blue moonlight as he padded his way down. He could hear footsteps rustling around him and faint giggling, but a pitter-patter of small feet sounded like a child had run in front of him. Giggling and running around him, the hallway is a lot longer than he remembered it. It seemed endless, like the ride home from the hospital. He heard the door creak in front of him. Mom? He called out in a shaky voice. Suddenly, a door slammed behind him, and he jumped and turned around. Behind him, he heard a long, eerie groan from behind him. The sound broke right in his ear. He turned around as fast as he could, suddenly face to face with none other than his dead sister. Her eyes were clouded white, her skin pale, and the jaw bright. The side of her jaw only dangling on by tissue and a muscle. The glass protruding from her forehead and black blood leaking down her face. Her on the hair pulled up back and a ponytail as it always was. Wearing her gray t-shirt and athletic shorts which were dirty and spotted with blood. Her legs were bent in ways that they shouldn't be, and she stood emitting a long, croaking noise, only an inch away from Toby's face. Toby yelped and fell back. "Aw!" She started to crawl backward. "Ah!" He started to crawl backwards away from her, unable to break eye contact he held with her. The eye contact he held with her. Blank, dead eyes. He dragged himself backwards until he backed up into something. And he stopped for a second. Everything was dead silent except for his heavy breathing and crying. He slowly looked up to meet the blank face of a tall, dark figure that stood over him. Behind the tall, dark massa were rows of children looking to range from 3 to 10 years. Their eyes were completely black, and dark black light leaked from their eye sockets. He screamed and stood up as fast as he could, only to be tripped by dark black tendrils that wrapped around his ankle. He fell straight on his stomach and got the wind knocked out of his chest. He tried to scream out, but he couldn't make a sound. The dark black tendrils that wrapped around his ankle. He fell straight on his stomach and he tried to scream, but he couldn't make a sound. He wheezed out before it all went black. Toby woke up with a start. He screamed out and sat up as fast as he could, completely short of breath. He wheezed out and held out his chest with his bandaged hands. It was a dream, just a dream. He laid back down on his bed and rolled over on his side. It felt like a giant weight had been lifted off his chest as he took a deep breath. He stood up and padded over to his window. You serious? Oh. He saw nothing. Nobody was out there. No ghosts, no figures, nothing. He heard the rustling and coughing of his father out the doorway. The door was closed. He walked over and opened it, looking out of the hallway once again. He padded down the hallway into the kitchen where he found his dad standing and having a smoke in their living room. Toby waited a second and watched him from around the corner before a burning feeling deep in his chest. Deep boiling anger took over him. He heard a little imaginary voice as I said, "Do it, do it, do it," they chanted. He turned away from it and held his arms. He felt like he actually had control over himself, unlike he did for the past few weeks since he got home from the hospital. He actually had complete thoughts for just moments before they got clouded by the chanting of little voices in his head. "Kill him. He wasn't there. He wasn't there. Kill him. Kill him," continued on. Toby trembled. No, he wasn't going to do it. What was he going crazy? No, he won't kill anyone. He can't. He is his father, but no way was he going to kill him. That was it. The thought he had before. He fell into an idle state once again. The influence of voices in his head was too much. He began to silently walk up to his father. He reached over to the counter to a knife holder in the kitchen and pulled out the largest knife he had been resting in the case. He gripped in his hand and felt a sensation take over his chest. He let out a snicker. He began laughing so hard that he had to gasp for breath. His father turned around abruptly before he felt a brute force shoving him to the floor. He grunted as the air was knocked out of him. What? He looked up at the boy who stood over him, grasping the kitchen knife in his hand. Toby, what are you doing? He went to set up and put his arms over the front of himself in self-defense. Before you knew it, Toby was on top of him. He went to grab his neck, but his father reached out and blocked his hand by grabbing it into his wrist. Stop! Get off me, you little fricker! Get off me, you little fucker! He yelled and with his other hand, he threw an off-center punch toward Toby's shoulder, but he didn't stop. The look in Toby's eyes was not insane. It looked as if a demon had taken control over him. He yelled back and went to stab the knife into his father's chest, but he blocked him and grabbed his wrist once again. He went to shove him back, but Toby kicked out his feet in front of him and landed in a hard blow straight into his face. His father recoiled and put his arms away to cuff his face, but Toby got back up and drove the knife straight into his shoulder. His father let out a loud cry and went to pull the knife out, but before he could, Toby threw his fist straight into his face. He began to pound his fists. He began to pound his fists into his head, laughing and wheezing. He cracked his neck and grabbed the knife and ripped it out of his shoulder and drove it deep into his dad's chest and repeatedly stabbed into his torso, blood spilling out and getting splattered everywhere. He didn't stop until his father's body went still. He threw the knife over to the side and leaned over his body, coughing and panting. He stared at his smashed it in the face and sat there twitching until a loud scream broke in the silence. He looked over to see his mother standing a few feet away, covering her mouth, tears streaming down her eyes. Toby, he screamed, "Why did you do that?" And she cried. "What? Why? Why? What?" He screamed. Toby stood up and began to back away from his father's body. His father's bloody corpse. He began to back into the kitchen. He looked down at the blood-soaked bandages on his hands and looked up at his mother one last time before he turned and ran out the house. He ran into the garage and slammed his hand against the control panel on the walls to push open the garage door, but before he began to out his father's two matches that had been hanging in the tool rack above the full jars, filled to the rim with the old rusted nails and screws. One hatchet was new, and it had a bright orange handle and a shiny blade. The other was old and wooden handle with the old dull blade. He grabbed both and looked down at the table, and his eyes met a box of matches under the table. It was red gasoline tank. He held both of the hatches in one hand and grabbed matches and gasoline before running out of the garage, down the driveway, and up the street. As he approached the street light, he could see out his own bedroom window and heard police sirens in the distance. He turned around on the red and blue flashing lights came rushing down the street. Toby stood there for a second before he pulled open the cap of the gasoline tank and ran down the street, spilling the gasoline all over the street after him, and he turned into the trees. He poured the last bit of gasoline out before he reached into his pocket and pulled out a match and struck it into the box and immediately dropped it. In an instant, the flames burst around him. The fire caught the trees and around him. He looked around him. The fire caught the trees and bushes around him. Before he knew it, he was surrounded by fire. Before he knew it, he was surrounded by fire. The silhouettes of police cars were visible through the flames. As he backed away into the forest around him, he looked around, but his vision was blurred. His heart pounded. Closed his eyes for a moment. This was it. This was the end. Toby felt a hand on his shoulder. He opened his eyes and looked over to see a large white hand with long bony fingers that rested on his shoulder. He followed the arm and was attached. Followed his arm toward the dark figure. It appeared to be wearing a dark black suit, and its face was completely blank. It towered over Toby's small frame and looked down at him. Tendrils rest out from its black before Toby knew it. His vision blurred and he was surrounded by the sound of ringing in his ears. Everything went blank. That was it. That was the end. That's how Toby Rogers died. A few weeks later, Connie sat in his sister's kitchen. Her sister, Lori, sat next to her drinking a cup of coffee. About 3 weeks ago, Connie lost her husband and her son. A few weeks before, she had lost her daughter to a car crash. Since then, she moved with her sister. The police were keeping her busy. They had just finished cleaning up the case, and the story had been released 2 weeks ago. And the focus of the world seemed to be having shifted to completely new stories. Lori switched the TV to new broadcasts. On the TV, the news reporter began introducing the new headline. We had breaking news. Last night there has been a reported murder of 4 individuals. There are no suspects yet, and the victims were the group of middle school kids had been out in the woods last night. The kids had been bludgeoned and stabbed to death. Investigators had discovered a weapon at the crime scene, which appears to be old, a dull-bladed hatchet, as you can see here. Picture change shows snapshots of the weapon at the exact crime scene, which appears to be shows the weapon exactly as it was left on the crime scene. Investigators had pulled up the name of a possible suspect, Toby Rogers. A 17-year-old boy a few weeks ago had stabbed his father to death and then tried to cover up his escape by setting a fire in the streets and the forest. around the neighborhood. Although they had believed the young boy had died in the fire, investigators suspect that Rogers may still be alive due to the fact that his body was never found. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed the story on Toby. It was kind of strange and actually kind of freaky out the first time I heard it. It was funny. And as you can see, that I put up a funny image that says, "My life, my choice, my problems, my lesson, not your business. Mind your own problems before you talk about mine. My life is not your story to tell." It's kind of how Toby would think. That's for some reason I think it fits the story. But that was the Toby story, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. I certainly did enjoy telling it, and I hope you enjoy that creepy Friday, but on a Saturday. Bye.